The city of Rossville and the Peerless Woolen Mills came into existence at about the same time in 1905. John L. Hutchison Sr. felt this was the perfect place to build his mill. It was close to everything he needed, and the land was available, and there was plenty of water, and for the day it was quite a plant. Built from brick and steel, it had electricity and bathrooms for his employees. That sounds pretty standard now, but back in the day that was pretty fancy. For the first few decades, as the plant grew, the city grew, and as more people moved here to work for the Peerless, more houses were built, more streets were paved, and we got more infrastructure. It was a period of real growth, in fact. Rossville was considered one of the most progressive cities in Georgia, the whole South for that matter, and because of all these things going on, we got lots of retail and service businesses because of the people working at the mill needed to shop and wanted to do it close to home.
But I found this picture of the Peerless Pharmacy, some folks that I think we can all recognize, Pete Moore, Toppy Van, and I believe that's Tommy All that's there in that. And that's the Peerless Pharmacy. Their phone number was Canal 41501. And at that time, our phone numbers were like, mine started out 42297, then it became Canal 42297, and then it became whatever the canal is, and they dropped the canal and used the numerals for that. That was located up on Bailey Avenue, the Peerless Pharmacy. Next door to the Peerless Pharmacy was something called the Peerless Cloth Store. And they had remnants of cloth that was from the Peerless. At that time, my mom and dad weren't working there, but we would go there. My mom would buy those remnants from all those plaids and so forth, and she'd make me clothes. And I guess some of the time they worked at the Peerless, she bought some, because I can remember her making me a baby blue coat, wool coat, and it had caplets on the sleeves of it. That's what we call them today, like the Marines and service people had, the caplets. And they were leopard, and it had leopard covered buttons, real leopard. And she would go downtown to one of the stores downtown across from Tivoli called Field and Children's Shop, and she would draw a picture of what was in that window, and she'd go home and make it. She was a great seamstress. And so the lady that ran the cloth store there, my dad had access to oranges in Florida, and he'd bring her fruit and stuff for her doing that. And so that was a great experience for us. And next door to that, if I remember correctly, was not the drugstore, but the grocery store. And I believe that was Leaks, but it had something to do, they rented, I guess, the Peerless, Leaks grocery store. And they too had a delivery person that delivered it. And I remember that well. And then next door to that, I spent a lot of my very, very young years at the Peerless, kindergarten. He provided a place for the children to stay while their parents worked. So I didn't stay there very much because the lady spanked me for turning over a glass of milk. And it made my mom mad, so she took me out of there, and that's when I stayed at home. But in my later years, about 40 years ago, I went to a yard sale up in Red Bank, and they had a picture there that this lady said hung in the kindergarten, there at the Peerless Kindergarten. And I said, "And what is your name?" And she told me. And that's the lady that gave me the spanking. And I told her that how strange things happen. And I told her, I said, "Well, my name is Judy Watts." And I said, "My mom took me out of there for you spanking me for turning over a glass of milk." Of course, I was a mean wee kid. I was always into everything. Nothing's changed. So that was one of my fondest memories.
The Peerless Drugstore, which the building is still there, that was the morning after football games. We'd all gather there and have a milkshake if we had a quarter. And we would think of the Moore family and the Bakers, and we were just a group of people that we went to church together, and we just, and on Sunday afternoon we'd have a big meal, and we'd take time about going to different ones' house as family and have a meal and get out and play ball every Sunday evening. So those were some really good old days.
And you had to stand in line at the Joanne shop, the personality shop, and wait on 2 or 3 red lights to cross. And this is a parade down there. This is on the Tennessee side, but it's going down to, that's at the state line there, and it's going down to where the Joanne shop and them were. And we took my old annuals and looked at all the many, there's the Peerless service station ad, there's Willie's Supermarket, how many of you remember that? And Bailey's Furniture Store, the M&J was down there, Rossville Hardware, Ryan's Pharmacy, Clean-O-Matic, and Clean-O-Matic is still there. And then there's the Home Steam Laundry truck with a couple of folks, Frank and Ann, taking their laundry down there. They picked up your laundry in that old truck. And this is Bill Campbell at Hickson's Men's Store and shows with some of the football players. It was just a fun time.
In the years just before World War II, there was around 2,000 people working there. But once America got into the war, business picked up. Peerless got contracts to make blankets and uniform material for the military. I think that during the war and a few years after, Peerless made more than 11 million woolen blankets for the Army and the Navy and produced 12 million yards of uniform cloth at the peak. The mill was shipping 30,000 blankets a day. The Peerless was always a great corporate citizen. So much of what Rossville has wouldn't have been possible without the help from the Hutchinsons and that mill. One of the most memorable and visible things that the Peerless did for Rossville revolved around sports.
They had kids' basketball programs. I'm not sure exactly how they were picked, but they were, you know, you had a shirt and whatever to play basketball in. Then later on it got where it was a pretty big thing with Little League Baseball. In fact, one year they won the Dixie Boys Baseball Championship. Quite a few teams in the South states, Mississippi, South Carolina, and these kids won that championship. When there was only the Peerless Gym there on Bailey Avenue, they had teams that you could play basketball, volleyball, badminton, and it was all sponsored by the Peerless. And the equipment was furnished by Peerless. In addition to that, they had a team that represented the mill, basketball team, softball team. And whenever I was small, they had a really good baseball program, played all over the South. In fact, they went to a national tournament in Battle Creek, Michigan, and finished, I think, second there. And that's like all your recreation programs. No money was collected for a gate admission or whatever. All furnished by the Peerless.
You know, and I remember the athletic teams that came out of the old Peerless Woolen Mill. The basketball teams, softball. Went to school with a girl that her dad played for the Peerless softball fast pitch team. Made it into the Hall of Fame, the ASA Softball Hall of Fame out in Oklahoma City, which, you know, I was on vacation and had to visit there. I was a big softball player in my day and liked to umpire and So going there was something I wanted to do, and then when I found out that Jeannie's dad was in the Hall of Fame, of course I had to get home and call her and say, wow, why didn't you ever tell us this? And she was, well, it's no big deal to us. Dad just played softball. And that's the way it was, I think, with a lot of people here in Rossville. But I know that they were good about bringing players in. We talk about recruiting today in the high school ranks. Man, these guys would bring players in, from all over the country, give them a job in the mill, but their job was to play basketball, to play softball.
I did play, I went to North Rossville, which is no longer here. And behind North Rossville was what we called the barn, which was an old white wooden building. And that's where the junior high practiced at that time. The junior high had it's called junior high in those days, now it's the middle school, okay? But I actually played on the first basketball team that Rossville had, the middle school had, in the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. Then I had to make a choice whether to stay with sports or go into the band. So I stayed with the band and played trumpet in the band and enjoyed that with Dale Schaffner. But we had the barn there in which we played, if you would, intramurals. But the gym over here at the Peerless was where there was a home court for the middle school or the junior high. That's where we practiced and that's where we played our home games. And to be on the same court in which you idolize these semi-pro basketball players that was from Peerless was just an awesome to go in to dress in the same dressing room. It was kind of like when I was 13 and I played on the Knot-Hole baseball team here at Rossville, and we actually got to go over and play in the final series of the Chattanooga area at Ingle Stadium. And we played against Tyner. The winner of that game went to Cincinnati. We got beat, so they went to Cincinnati. We came back home to Rossville. But we had the experience of playing on what was in the biggest facility in this area, which was Ingle Stadium.
Well, the Hutchisons built the football field, and that field was played on in September 1949, the first game. The sod was brought from Riverview Golf Course and laid. I'm not sure who was a supervisor of it, but quite a few kids that were big enough and strong enough, they took the sod off the trucks that came from over in North Chattanooga and put it on the field down there. The rumor is that Mr. Hutchison decided that the school needed to be advertised more. He hired I can't say that he hired, but he influenced the coaches that came and coached the first football game here. He brought them from Georgia Tech, where his son, John L. Jr., was going to school. The first coach at that field was a fellow named Lewis Hook, who had went to school with Bob McCoy and the Hutchisons. And Lewis was a little bit older than them in that he had been in the service during the Second World War and then came to Georgia Tech as a veteran and played football. He came and they also hired a fellow named Glenn Wade from Carson Newman, who came here with him. That was the best football field in Chattanooga when it was built. And from that point on, Coach Hook had a heart attack. He was here 2 years, and then Coach Wade became the coach. And the program just got better and better. We had the best uniforms. We had the best field to play on. When we traveled, we went on Greyhound buses. Most people went on school buses. What we had was first class. And it was, most of it came from the Hutchinson and Peerless Woolen Mill.
The Hutchinsons built a community center that had a 12-lane bowling alley, a cafe, and a very modern gym. It cost $500,000 back in the day and was the envy of towns all around. It was built right next to the Rossville football field, and that's another thing. That football field was state-of-the-art. Even today, it has what is called a crown grate that allows the field to drain off rainwater so fast that it doesn't get soggy. And the Hutchinsons had an employee that supposedly worked at the mill, but in reality, his whole job was to keep the field maintained. He cut the grass, he did all the landscaping, and even kept the stands up. But that community center is still there, and the bowling alley and cafe are gone. But the gym is still used, and the rooms are also still used there. To help the employees, you know, they weren't paid a lot of money, but the Hutchinsons tried to make their lives easier by giving them lots of benefits. Like they built this great gym right on McFarland, and the gym was upstairs, but downstairs there was a grocery store, a pharmacy, and a dry goods store. They were meant for the employees to use, and the prices were better than they could get at most other stores. Now, I don't know if the Hutchinsons subsidized it or anything, but the stores were a great place for employees to go and save money.
It was kind of like a company store. They had a, well, and I guess it was a 1936 edition we looked at, wasn't it, Teddy? The Peerless service station was built, and the employees could purchase car tires, batteries, gas, whatever from the service station and pay through their payroll deduction. The same thing with Peerless Incorporated, which is was kind of across the street from us now. They had appliances, radios, guns, knives, whatever, and the employees could purchase them there and pay through payroll deduction.
My best friend Wilma Scott, who married Houston Scott, she was Wilma Chastain. I remember he was the soda jerk at the Peerless pharmacy. And he rode a bicycle and delivered prescriptions, and he delivered sodas and lunch to people, all the business around there, because the favorite thing that we had was pimento cheese sandwiches and milkshakes. And then he would bring ice cream to my mom after he got off from work.
I know for a fact, just my family members that worked there as adults, you know, the picnics that they would have, and just the fact that if you got hurt and couldn't work, the Hutchinsons took care of you. You know, if you were part of the workforce over here, you weren't just workforce, you were family, and they viewed it like that, and the people that worked there viewed it like that. And you're right, they didn't pay a lot, but you know, it's kind of like, I think, as you and I have talked before, that you know, you see people today making $15 an hour and they're not happy. Well, it's because they don't have the benefits. They're not taken care of the way that Mr. Hutchinson took care of his employees.
I think the way that it was ran at that time, they kind of wanted the co-workers to be friends. That's why I think they had so many parties. They not only had the Christmas party, they had Labor Day parties. Anytime there's a reason to party, it was a party. And I was thinking about some of the things. It looks like there was always a party going on. There's always sports going on, and there's always hard work going on. And if you didn't like any of those things, you kind of had luck. But that was kind of what it was all about. They had some company stores here. There's in the same building where the gym was at, downstairs, there was a Peerless grocery store that the Leak family owned and operated. There was a drugstore, Peerless drugstore, that was called a dry goods store, and I never could understand that, but it was where you could buy material and sew, and that's back when mamas would sew
shirts and pants and suits, and you know, you didn't buy clothes in the stores, but there was facilities for all of that. There's a Peerless gas station right down the street here. There was housing that were available for some people that worked at Peerless. There was a daycare. I went to the nursery. This was before daycares and nursery was hardly thought about in the late 40s and early 50s, but I didn't know what was that. And I can tell you right now which building it's in. It's on the other side of that gym, okay? So it was kind of a futuristic place to work, really, but you had to work, you know, and so you would look forward to going and talking to your peers and your co-workers, because that's kind of how they had it. I never did meet, I guess it's John L. Hutchison, who was the founder as such, but I understood that anybody could walk up to him and call him by his first name and he'd take time to talk. And that means so much when you're working for somebody. And I don't know if the pay was good or bad. Nobody seemingly complained about it. They was glad to have a job. I do know that there were carpooling from Sand Mountain down here. The farmers on Sand Mountain would bring their produce down, and you know, they would not bus, but they would, you know, fill the car full of workers that was going to work for second shift and going to work for third shift and carpool. A lot of innovative things that went on that you sit and scratch your head, and I say, how did that ever happen? How could that ever happen again? How could an individual such as a family of the Hutchisons do what they did? I don't know. It hadn't been done since.
The Peerless was the biggest employer in the whole area for most of the 20s and through the 50s. But in 1961, about 10 years after the Hutchisons merged with Burlington Industries, the employees voted to accept union representation. Now, Burlington had told them that if they did this, they'd shut the mill down. Well, the vote went through, and the mill was completely shut down within a year.
After that, I went to work up in Cleveland for Burlington. I was over the yarn storage plant, but then I came back to work here in Rossville for Rossville Yarn Processing, which the Hutchisons had started. And one time we had a pretty big operation there, and I was in the dye house as supervisor there.
After Burlington shut Peerless down, a few companies came in and tried to keep things going in the mill. Borg Textile, Coats of America, Rossville Yarn, and a few others moved in and started using the mill again. It never got to be a successful place that the Peerless had been, but the mill kept going in a few more decades after that. Rossville doesn't have the Peerless anymore, but there's still hope that something can be done with the land there. It's close to everything. I mean, that's why the Hutchisons built there in the first place. So I'm sure that soon we'll have a bustling employer in Rossville again. I think this town still has a lot to give, and our best days are yet to be ahead of us.